Good evening. Welcome to the City of Hartford Committee meeting, Public Works, Parks, Recreation, Environment Committee. This is a live broadcast / stream of tonight's meeting. It's going to be broadcast on HPA-TV, Comcast, and Frontier Government channels 96 and 6032. It will also be streamed via HPA-TV.org, the HPA-TV Facebook page, and HPA-TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, and Amazon TV apps. It will also be rebroadcast and made available on the HPA-TV YouTube channel. So today is Wednesday, March 9th. Wow. I wrote down the 8th all day. Oh my God. Today is Wednesday, March 9th. I am Councilwoman Marilyn Rossetti. I am the chair of this committee. With me tonight, council people who are both voting members is Councilman Nick LeBron and Councilman John Gale. Our first agenda item is the update from Hartford Decides presentation with Richard Frieder. Richard, why don't we go around and I see everybody who's on the screen and you can identify who you're with here tonight. How's that? Frank, can I start with you?
Sure. My name is Frank Sentner. I'm the board of Hartford Decides, and I'm a resident at 21A Capitol Avenue and a proud member of the Hartford Democratic Town Committee.
Thank you, Frank. Jared Chase.
Sure. I'm Jared Chase, the board chair for Hartford Decides, and Frank Sentner's proud neighbor on Capitol Avenue.
Heather Nelson.
You're at the mute. Yes. Hi, I'm Heather Nelson, also a board member of Hartford Decides. I don't have the pleasure of living in the city, but I support it and love it very much.
And we love that also. Mia Gallett.
Hi, my name is Mia Gallett. Sorry, my voice, I'm a little bit sick. And I'm a new hire as the program manager of Hartford Decides, and I'm a student at UConn.
I see our Corp Counsel, Jim Del Visco. I see our Corp Counsel, Sierra Manacci More. I've been practicing it for a month. I see Jack Hale. Jack, do you want to, we might as well do everybody now. Jack Hale, say who you're here with.
Hi, I'm Jack Hale. I'm a resident of Hartford on Carmel Street, and I'm chair of the Tree Advisory Commission.
Okay, thank you. Patrick from KNOX.
Hi, I'm Patrick Doyle. I'm executive director of KNOX. We have an on-call tree planting contract with the city of Hartford.
I see Heather Dion, our city forester. You want to say, Heather, anything? You're here. Okay, great. Sherry Johnson. I see your name. I don't see it. There you are.
Oh, here I am. Hi, I'm Sherry Johnson. I'm a board member of Hartford Decides and a Hartford resident.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Director Looney. I was just saying this is probably your favorite kind of weather, huh, Director?
Oh, it's been fantastic today.
Yeah, see, I could tell.
Michael Looney, Director of Public Works with City of Hartford, resident of Elizabeth Street.
Thank you. So we will start with the update from Hartford Decides, and I am going to share their presentation on the screen, and it went so smoothly last time. Let's see what happens. There we go. So Richard, just tell me when you want to go to the next slide. How's that?
Great, thank you. By the way, everybody, I'm Richard Frieder, also with Hartford Decides. And Jared was going to start us off. So Jared, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Chairperson Rossetti, and to the full City Council for inviting us to join your meeting this evening. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Jared Chase. I'm the board chair for Hartford Decides. My job tonight is just to kick off a brief presentation and discussion about Hartford Decides. I guess, could we go to the next slide, please?
What am I doing wrong? Hold on.
Marilyn, try the down arrow.
I did. Page down. It worked when we last did it. Hold on. What else could I do? Let's see.
That's probably what you needed to do. Try it again now.
Okay.
If you click on it, you've activated it. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. Excellent. So I just want to talk a little bit about what it is we do at Hartford Decides. I'll start with the text at the bottom about sort of the process in general. This is something that happens worldwide, but Hartford Decides is the first example, and we believe still the only example in Connecticut of participatory budgeting, which is a form of participatory democracy in which community members decide how to spend a portion of a public budget. Participatory budgeting engages residents, both in the development of project ideas and also in a public vote, thereby giving them a direct voice in how public money is used. And it results in important community improvement projects, some examples of which we'll be showing you in a moment. I do want to talk a little bit about the process at the top. It starts with the brainstorming of ideas, and we're actually in that part of the cycle right now where we're going to be convening some community meetings in which we invite residents to join and to talk about how they would like to help improve the city. So the brainstorming is the first phase. It then continues through the development of formal project ideas that are vetted with the city. There's then a public vote, which usually happens in the spring. And finally, those projects that win the public vote are funded. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the initiative for participatory budgeting in Hartford is called Hartford Decides. It rolls off the tongue a little bit more easily. It was launched in 2015 with the first public vote happening the following year, and is the first such example, as I mentioned, in the state. Next slide, please. All right, thanks. Just a little bit more about who we are. From its inception, Hartford Decides has been planned and managed by a volunteer board of directors. There are currently 11 of us. I should underscore that the process is really driven by Hartford residents, but we help shepherd, the board helps shepherd the process through to completion, making sure, for example, that projects are vetted with City of Hartford staff before they appear on a ballot. Additionally, as Richard mentioned, we were fortunate to receive a grant from the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, with which we have been able to now work with two talented paid team members, Mia and Giovanni, both of whom I believe are on the call. Next slide, please. It's important, of course, that we thank City Council for its support of Hartford Decides, without which participatory budgeting couldn't happen in the city of Hartford. In the just concluded fiscal year 2020-21, Hartford Decides was allocated $40,000 from Hartford's capital budget. In the current cycle, 21-22, we've been allocated $56,142. And so this is something we really sort of underscore. When we send out public announcements, we like to start with a question to Hartford residents, which is, how would you spend $40,000 or $50,000 to improve your neighborhood? And I think that really resonates with people and gets them to start thinking about how they can have a voice in improving their immediate environment and the city as a whole. Next slide, please. And finally, I'd like to mention that the entire allocation from the City of Hartford is used to fund projects directly, nothing else, nothing in terms of operations. Those come from other sources. As it says on the bottom, those other sources are foundations and individuals that cover the entirety of our operating expenses. The final thing I'll just mention, something of which we're very proud, is that participation in Hartford Decides is open to residents as young as 13 years of age. So we're really engaging young people, even in the years leading up to their eligibility to vote in city council elections and things of that nature. So thank you. Well, I think I'll pass it now to Richard.
Thanks, Jared. And next slide, please. We wanted to share a little bit of information with you about some of the recent winning projects. So we're just going to highlight 4 of them quickly. Next slide. This is a project that won in this past year, tree beautification for schools. This was actually in partnership with KNOX and Patrick, who's happens to be with us here on in this meeting. But in this project, about $20,000 was allocated to purchase 30 trees planted at 5 different schools. And it might be a little too small for you to make out, but those schools were America's Choice at Sand and Buckley High School, and Global Communications Academy, and Noah Webster Magnet School, and the Thurman Milner School. and these schools were identified with the help of the city forester, who also happens to be on this call. So we thank Heather for her working with us, and KNOX also. In October, I think it was early October, we had the pleasure of going out with Patrick and a number of his staff and digging holes. I guess the holes were already dug, but we helped stick the trees in the ground and fill the holes with dirt. So this was a great project, and it's a complete project. Next slide, please. This project is the Wallace-Stevens Bridge Sidewalk Repair. This is also a winning project from last year. We're working with DPW to, well, they're doing the work, but we're trying to coordinate with them to repave the sidewalks at the Wallace-Stevens Bridge, which is the Asylum Avenue Bridge over the Park River between Woodland and Elizabeth Streets. This is actually on the Wallace-Stevens Walk, which many of you may be familiar with. It's a historic walk that follows Wallace-Stevens' route that he traditionally took walking every day from his home to his office at the Hartford, rather. And an interesting thing about this project is, as we began to implement it, because as Jared pointed out with that graphic earlier, we go through a process, and when the community votes and the winning projects are identified, it's very important to note that that's not the end of the process. The projects then need to be implemented. And we work with it's almost always the city. Janice Castle has been a great asset the past couple of years in helping us with us. And but now we're working with some of Mike Looney's staff at DPW on these sidewalks, and it was discovered that there are actually utility lines running under the pavement. I don't think it's pavement actually, but the material there on the sidewalks, you can see what a mess it is. I mean, it really very badly needs to be redone. But we didn't know until we went to begin to implement that there are these utility lines in there. So DPW is now investigating that to get a better sense of what that means for moving the project forward. But we're continuing to work with them on that. Next slide, please. And then from the previous year, I just want to quickly show you two projects. This is the Keeney Park Fitness Trail. And this and the next project actually was developed by high school students in Hartford schools. We're actually talking with Hartford Public Schools right now about possibly working with them again and students from the schools for this new cycle. Last year, they were too preoccupied with COVID, which is understandable. So we didn't work with the schools last year, but we're hoping to this year. But in any case, 2 years ago, the students had an idea of putting in a fitness trail in Keeney Park, and we were able to connect them with Herb Virgo. Many of you may know Herb with the Keeney Park Sustainability Project. And Herb actually worked with the students, and it turned out that there was a fitness trail, an old sort of dilapidated fitness trail already in Keeney Park that needed to be replaced. So the students developed into a project, and it was one of the winning projects. And that equipment is now is in, and I believe it's installed. I talked with Herb not long ago. And sometime next month, we're hoping to have a sort of a ribbon cutting to kind of celebrate the completion of this project. Next slide, please. And then the last project we wanted to show you tonight is some enhancements to the skating rink in Bushnell Park. And as I mentioned, this also was developed by high school students. And they had the idea of, they said, wow, that skating rink is great. Hartford needs another one. So we worked with them and helped them understand that with the $20,000 that was available, you would not be able to build another skating rink. But you might be able to support some enhancements or improvements to the skating rink that already exists. So again, we were able to connect them with a community person, Jackie Mandyke from iQuilt, and she worked with them, and they developed a project to get skating aids, which you see, the penguin skating aids that you see in the upper right and also in the lower left. Those are for people, whether young or older, who are not such good skaters, and they can kind of hold on to the penguin until their skating skills get better. And also included in the project was the purchase of 2 igloos, which you can see in the bottom right there. And these provide just a place where people can go in and warm up a little bit on the really cold days or cold nights. So those are the 4 projects that we wanted to feature. There have been lots of other projects, but we didn't want to take the time to go through all of them. But we're really proud of these projects. They're all, as Jared said, this is a totally community-driven process. The project ideas come from community members, Hartford residents, and then they have the opportunity to work on the ideas to turn an idea into a proposal for the community vote. So as important as the projects are, there's more to Hartford Decides than that. And we're going to go to the next slide, please. And the other big part of participatory budgeting and Hartford Decides is community engagement. And Heather, you're going to take it from here, right?
I would love to. Thank you, Richard. One of the strongest pulls for me with Hartford Decides is community engagement. And the engagement leads to action and provides results that people benefit from right where they live. And Hartford Decides makes it even better by including and bringing in the community's youth. I remember very distinctly being a child in my parents' home, and what my mother and father said, that's what went. But there were times when myself, my brother and sisters, we had ideas or opinions, and we were able to respectfully, very respectfully, voice or present them. And sometimes what had been decided by my parents changed. It was a powerful lesson that resonated. For Hartford Decides, age 13 is when you get to vote. However, like the tree project they mentioned, we had children much younger than 13 at Sands Elementary School planting trees. Heather and Patrick, it's lovely to see you here. Always a pleasure. But engaged youth are more inclined to stay engaged and become engaged adults. And what better catalyst than our own community, your own community? The natural connection and incredible upside seem boundless to me. How likely is it that a person that's involved in the activities of their community, they're going to take the time to know the issues that directly affect their community? And oftentimes those issues touch and are tightly woven together. When we engage these constituents, we create a network of connected, knowledgeable people, which only makes the city of Hartford greater, which is awesome, what everyone wants. And so we're here. How can you help? What do we need from you? As Jared and Richard said, our current cycle is starting right now. We would love for you to spread the word. Let people know this is how they have voice within their community. We're on, next slide, please. I almost forgot. I got so excited. So this is our flyer, which is on our website and our social media platforms, I'm learning, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And if your offices are willing to distribute them, please put the email address or the area of a person we should contact in the chat, and we will be sure to do so. Because the wider this is spread, the better for everyone. And of course, we welcome your participation. All of the upcoming community brainstorming sessions that Jared spoke of, all of those meetings are listed on the Hartford Decides homepage. So please consider this your official invitation to join us and see exactly what it is we do and how it all begins. We are incredibly appreciative of your past support. And Richard just showed exactly what that support has enabled in Hartford. Without your understanding and vision, no matter the wonderful ideas Hartford residents generate, Hartford Decides simply would not have the funds that bring these projects to life. So thank you. Thank you very much. Next month, we'll be submitting the budget request for fiscal year 22-23. And we thank you again for giving us this time, for your support. And we would love to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we done with the presentations done?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So thank you very much. Before I open this to my colleagues, I would be, and we're joined by Deputy Director Troy Stewart. I see he just came on. I don't think anybody else has come on. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was this Linda Bear's kind of baby, kind of brainchild, Richard?
I'll tell you, without going into a long story here, 10 years ago, I went to a conference in Seattle and went to a presentation on something called participatory budgeting, which I'd never heard of. And I thought, wow, this is a great idea. And came back and started talking with people. And one of them was Linda. And Linda and I really initially got Hartford Decides off the ground. Linda was absolutely instrumental in.
This is not to take it away from anybody else, but I just want to be able to mention Linda's name.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Linda wouldn't have happened without Linda. Absolutely.
And I see Director Oliver has joined us. So now I will open this up to my colleagues. Questions? We'll start with Councilman LeBron.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. I've been, I feel like a part of Hartford Decides for a long time. Richard, Mr. Frieder, you and I go back.
Call me Richard, please.
Yes. So Richard, yes. You know, one of the things I like to see is the progress. I remember when some of the winners in the past, this is maybe going back 8 years, where I was happy to be a part of putting or placing the mural for Jackie McLean on the side of the Achievement First building. But we didn't, at least at that point with Hartford Decides, I don't think we had, the people to kind of move the project through. So I remember, as an aside to my regular day job, trying to overcome the hurdle, and there were several hurdles to try to get that on that building. I'm glad that it's there now. So I just, to see staff and the amount of people that I'm looking at all dedicated to move projects through, I'm very pleased about that, and to see it grow in that way. So I'm very excited about not only the folks winning, but the ability to get it done, right? Like put it over the finish line. And Richard, I'm not sure if there were projects in the past that weren't able to make it over the finish line because they didn't have that the people to support it, but I may be wrong in that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Richard. Yeah.
Well, yeah, just to respond, thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And you, Nick, have been very supportive, not only since you joined City Council, but before you joined City Council. So we appreciate that. We have gotten a lot better at this. The first couple of years, none of us had done it before. We made some mistakes. We were figuring it out.
Better is better.
Yeah. Thank you. So those first couple of years, we sometimes had trouble getting the projects across the finish line. We're in a better place now. We've got a great team. Working with Janice Castle has been terrific. But you're right, Nick. In the first year or two, it was a little shaky, but we're better now.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Please go ahead. I didn't want to.
Sure. No. So the two questions are, excuse me. The first one is around the Keeney Park. So a couple times, I wouldn't say often, but I know of the trail of the past exercise thing that they had there before. has there been partnership with parks at all? Because the old exercise equipment that was there, one of the reasons why it was dilapidated is because there were overgrown bushes and things around it, so it wasn't as accessible, and it wasn't very sightly. I don't know if that's the proper word. And so it's one thing to put the new equipment there, but also is there partnership to make sure that we maintain it, keep it clean, so that folks can continue to have access to that new equipment.
Honestly, I don't know. I'm going to be talking with Herb Virgo very soon, and I will check in with him about that. And DPW, of course, plays a role in that. And my understanding is that there's a close and good relationship between Herb and the Keeney Park Sustainability Project and DPW. I think they work together a lot, but Mike can speak up if he wishes to.
Well, just a suggestion, we don't want it to get like the old project, right? So I think
absolutely,
regular routine maintenance would do wonders, so that way folks can continue to use that.
Absolutely. I will ask Herb about that when we talk.
Okay, great. I don't know, Director, did you want to speak to that at all, or
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we are committed to keeping that up as it should be. We do work very closely with Herb Virgo and on a number of projects, this being one of them. So yeah, we will definitely be monitoring that and taking care of that.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, I have one more question. And so I'm interested in the Wallace Bridge. I walk over that bridge often, and it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, that normally I haven't seen a project like that come before us. And it just seems like, where does that fine line between the repair of the bridge / beautification? Like, of course, it needs to be fixed, but how did that project come to be? Are we heading in that direction where I'm thinking of it more of like a DPW project as opposed to a beautification project, although it needs, so can you explain to me, how that was decided and how'd you guys land on, and what does that marriage look like between, Hartford Decides and potentially DPW?
Well, all of the projects originate with ideas that come from people in the community. That project was suggested by somebody who lives, I believe, in the West End or Asylum Hill, who also, like you, goes over that bridge often. So he proposed the idea, and he helped develop it into a proposal. So then it went on the ballot, and it got enough votes to win. All of the projects in Hartford Decides, when it comes to implementation, we have to work with somebody to make sure the implementation happens. It's almost always the city working with, and often DPW. I think there are probably some exceptions to that. It's always a partnership, it's always a collaboration, and Janice plays an important connecting role in between Hartford Decides and whatever the appropriate city department is. Am I answering your question?
No, I think that's perfect. I appreciate that clarification, and you're right in that the beautification projects are going to go on some cities, in connection with the city. So it's definitely connected to a city institute, governmental arm, if you will. So I understand that. Thanks for making that clarification. That helped me to understand it better, and it does make more sense for me.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
By the way,
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
Madam
Richard.
Chair. I'm sorry, I didn't know the protocol. So, Madam Chair, may I add one other thing?
Yes, you may.
So that one of the things we learned over the years, I mentioned earlier that we've gotten better at this. It's critical in the beginning when ideas are proposed by the community. One of the steps involved in turning an idea into a proposal is to find out if somebody is already doing the project, or if if it conflicts with some other project or whatever. So we always check in with the city, whether it's Janice or Director Looney or whomever. It depends on what the project is. But that so the partnership begins even before the vote. And well, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to duplicate efforts. So just wanted to add that.
Good to know. Thank you. Councilman Gale.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very familiar with Hartford Decides. I've followed their efforts year in and year out, and I think I voted in just about every single year. So happy to see you guys. Happy to see that you're up for doing it again, and so that's very important. So thank you for all of that. The one thing that I think, well, the one question I have that hasn't been mentioned is that, you point out that none of the money that's allocated is spent on anything other than the project, but obviously you have some staff and some funding from somewhere else. And I think my question is who else is funding Hartford Decides here besides the city of Hartford?
First of all, Councilman Gale, thank you so much. You have been a very strong supporter of Hartford Decides since the beginning, so we really appreciate that. Would any of my Hartford Decides colleagues like to answer this question?
Sure, I'll be happy to, Richard, with permission of Madam Chairman. So,
Chairwoman.
I'm sorry, Chairwoman. Sorry, Marilyn.
Or chairperson.
So,
no problem, Frank.
John, could you restate your question? You wanted to know where else we're getting funding from, correct? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Okay.
You're on mute, John.
So
sorry about that. You have some staff, and I'm assuming your staff is paid by somebody.
Right.
And I'm assuming that somebody is not the money that you're getting from the city of Hartford.
Absolutely true.
So I'm just asking you to tell us who that funding source is.
That Hartford Foundation for Public Giving gave us an access grant in this past year. In preparation for that, Hartford Decides incorporated in 2019, and we were given a tax-exempt status, 501c3, in 2020. And that enabled us to go out and begin to solicit grants and donations, and we have been doing so for the last year. And that grant from Hartford Foundation for Public Giving will fund us through this year, but we need to continue to raise money if we're going to be able to have staff. All of the work that's been done for the last 3 years has been done by the volunteer board members. So I hope that answers the question, John.
No, it does. And kudos to all the volunteer board members. Thank you all for all of your efforts. And glad to see that you're getting some assistance now with the money from the Hartford Foundation and from others.
We're very appreciative.
We will spread the word. I will spread the word. We will spread the word. Try to get you more support.
Thank you.
And if someone were to want to donate to Hartford Decides, how would they do that?
They would go to www.hartforddecides with an S, not a $.org, and click on the donate button right at the top of the page.
Easy peasy.
You
okay.
bet.
Well, I don't have anything. Everything my colleagues have asked. Again, really great presentation. Thank you for bringing us up to date on what you've been doing so far, and we look forward to the future. I don't believe there's a motion needed for this. It's just a presentation. So as we say to our guests, you're welcome to stay for the next presentation, but we also understand people have things to do. So thank you very, very much for a wonderful presentation. It was nice to meet some people and see some others.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to agenda item 2.2, which is going to be an update from the Hartford Tree Advisory Commission. And I believe, I'm not exactly sure who's going to do the update on the 100,000 from last year for trees. I assume maybe you're tag teaming, Jack, Pat, Heather. So why don't you give it a start?
Thank you, Chairman Rossetti. Can you hear me?
Woman. Go ahead.
Chair. Yes, you are. This is this still International Women's Day?
It's whatever the women who are on this want it to be. You guys tell me, so we're good to go. So go ahead, Jack.
Thank you. As you mentioned, our city forester, Heather Dion, is here with me, as is Patrick Doyle from KNOX. So I'll kick this off, and then I'll hand it to Heather, and then to Patrick, and if you will, I will wrap up. As you mentioned, we're here to report on the use of the $100,000 that was allocated for tree planting in the general fund budget for this year. I'm happy to say we have had no difficulty finding ways to use that money for tree planting in the city. It's the main, of course, a major value of it is that we need to plant more trees in the city. The Canopy Action Plan, which was completed a couple of years ago now, estimated that at this point we needed to be planting 1,500 trees per year in order to repopulate our streets and move toward the canopy that we need to provide environmental services for the city. So any money we can get that will allow us to plant more trees is great. And I do want to acknowledge the Hartford Decides funding as part of the mix, particularly that it demonstrates that citizens of Hartford are interested in supporting planting trees in the city. The second reason that the funding was important is that it allows planting to be smoothed out over the course of the year, and in particular to plant trees in the fall. Prior to this money being allocated, tree planting in the city was entirely dependent on capital improvement money. And that same allocation of capital improvement money was also the source of funding for emergency response, storm response to downed trees. And because the city needs to be conservative about such things, the tendency was to hang on to that money until it was pretty clear that storm damage season was over with. And that meant that tree planting contracts seldom have been activated until spring. And that meant that all the planting had to be crammed into a really short period of time in the spring. With this money specifically for tree planting, it allows us to let the contract earlier and do a lot of planting in the fall. And Patrick will talk about that. It also means, another important aspect of the fall planting is that that's really the best time of year to plant trees. It allows roots to develop in the cool weather of the fall and even over the winter. Where if you're planting trees in the spring, particularly if you get up toward June, it can be really hot, and those trees suffer a lot when they get planted. So it's just tremendous to be able to kind of reorient the planting process, and also to spread it out over the full year. KNOX has been the engine for planting most trees in the city, and they have a crew that does that work. And if all the planting is in a really short period of time, it means that those people find themselves with nothing to do for the rest of the year, or they have to be repurposed for other things. So spreading the tree planting over the whole year is a really good thing for those Hartford residents who work for KNOX and who develop the specific skills of tree planting. another reason that we were promoting this particular funding was to provide more continuity in the planting activity, which means that folks at KNOX, all of us, are able to say, yeah, you need some trees in the city. Money is there to do that, and we can get it done. When we had to wait until spring to know that there would be funding available, it didn't make any sense to be talking to folks ahead of time about what's possible. Now, with the support of this money, we have that capability. And finally, this is almost symbolic, but allocating money from the general fund as opposed to the capital improvement budget is a statement, I believe, that planting trees is a normal part of the operation of the city. It's not just something to be done when money happens to be available. And that is absolutely critical. Planting trees is not a special thing. Planting trees is normal, and it has to continue every single year, moving right along. So those were all the different reasons that we wanted this funding to be available, and we really appreciate the fact, Councilwoman Rossetti, that you spearheaded the effort to get that money into the budget this year, that your council colleagues supported that, as did the mayor. So now I'm going to turn it over to our city forester, which, by the way, Hartford is a pretty special place. Not every city in the state has a city forester. It's really good that the city has invested in a professional to operate the forestry function in this city. And Heather is that. She's an experienced professional. So Heather Dion.
Thank you, Jack. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you. I mean, Jack covered a lot of it, and Patrick has a great quick presentation to give you, but I just want to thank you for your leadership and foresight into the importance of tree planting in the city. You know, we're battling with climate change. We've dealt with 3 droughts within the past, 6 years or so, significant enough to the fact that we're losing very mature trees at a rate that I've never seen. So trying to get ahead of the curve is going to be a huge challenge, but just knowing that folks in the city care and are active and really vocalizing how important this is. Just that statement that was made, Madam Chair, was huge. So thank you. And, we're going to keep pushing for getting folks to accept trees throughout the city. I know there's folks who have issues with leaf drop and, sewer line issues, that those are things that can come up sometimes, but with planting in the right place, including entanglement in utility wires. If we're thinking about planting in the right place, if we're looking at utilities, where they're located, if we're looking at various species and sizes and choosing the right trees, we stand a far better chance. And then also in some of the challenges that we do face fairly regularly, especially in our priority zones like Clay Arsenal, is the lack of public space to plant on. So getting creative and getting the education and outreach to those in the neighborhood to accept trees, perhaps even in backyards, because at this point, we're looking at a very big long-term goal. And it's like, at the end of the day, we have to think about children and grandchildren and their asthma. We need to think about the heat of the city, just how tremendously hot it is in the city. And, you know, we're battling lack of water, we're battling invasive insects, we're battling tree mortality, but we're not giving up. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Patrick.
And for you, Councilwoman Rossetti, I would ask if I could share my screen to pull this PowerPoint up.
How do I do that?
As long as you say it's okay, I think I have permission to do it.
You do? Okay, go ahead. Go for it. There you go.
All right. So I just have to get this going for everybody. So thanks very much. And, you know, I want to be really clear that KNOX appreciates deeply the partnership with the city. We don't profess that every single tree that ever gets planted in Hartford is planted by KNOX. We understand there's lots of other great efforts happening, but what I'm going to do is speak to what we do, because that's what I know. And so to share KNOX's experience with tree planting with you all, and certainly appreciate the support. I'd say one of the things that differentiates KNOX when it comes to tree planting is that we are ever present at the tree advisory commissions and doing our best to work in very close partnership with the city through the city forester, as well as the tree commission and others, to make sure that we are coordinating our efforts and focusing our efforts in the same ways and places that align overall with what the city is trying to do. So just to tell a little bit of a story, with the pandemic in 2020, planting efforts were quite strained by KNOX and from my observation, others in the city, but it was a tough year for tree planting in 2020. What we saw in 2021 is a reemergence, which was great. However, sort of speaking to the issue that Jack mentioned, as well as some other issues, there was uncertainty in terms of how much funding was available, when it might be available, and that hindered our ability and how much we could actually get done and how many trees we could plant. So including that $100,000 in the general fund of the city budget, what that did is it created a commitment, and it really allowed us to put that on our map and to really start as soon as possible in planting those trees in the fall. The other thing that I would say about that, and just something I will share with you in all of your roles, is that commitment builds capacity. And what I mean by that is including funds in the general budget and making a specific commitment to planting trees allows organizations like KNOX to do the planning and bring the staff in that are going to be able to make sure we're ready to plant those trees and can maximize how much gets done. So that was a huge win for us and really helped, not just with the 130 some odd trees that this money directly funded, but also with our ability to plant even more trees throughout the city. The result was we were able to plant 80% more trees this fall than we were the previous spring. So we saw the benefit of that. The other thing it allowed us to do, and as Jack mentioned, as we've worked and retooled our apprentice program a little bit, it allowed us to be bringing more Hartford City residents into the KNOX Green Crew apprentice program so that we're getting jobs and training opportunities. And thank you, Councilman LeBron, for participating this past November in our graduation for apprentices. But it again allowed us to know that we can bring more people and provide that experience for more Hartford City residents. Just as far as context and to help you understand when we start talking about the specific of where trees are planted, KNOX is working in partnership with the city and city funds, but also with grant makers, with donors, with volunteers, with private entities in order to be able to plant more trees in Hartford. So we planted 432 trees this fall in Hartford, 672 total for the year. And you can see here kind of where our funding sources came from. So specifically the money that was set aside by the council down here was 31% of the funding, with another 28% coming from other city funding. 23% came from grants and donors, and then 18% of funding came from private contracts. As an example, the Bushnell Park Foundation have been doing fundraising around trees and engaged KNOX specifically in planting in the park based on that specific initiative. That's going to be important to hold when we start talking about where we planted. And you may be asking the question, well, if downtown, as an example, within the tree canopy action plan is lower in the priority level for canopy coverage, why were trees planted downtown, right? And sometimes that has to do with a private entity asking us to play that role. And so here you see a little bit of that story. Our partnership with the Tree Advisory Commission, the city forester, is really about coordinating our planting so it fills in and does this plan. You can see the vast majority of our planting is in the priority 1 area. I want to make a quick note. These priorities are not about where neighborhoods rank in the city or how worthy they are. All neighborhoods in Hartford are a priority 1 neighborhood. Within the city tree plan, these neighborhoods are identified based on how much canopy coverage they have versus in respect to other neighborhoods. So priority.
Can I stop you for a minute, Patrick?
Yep.
Is there a reason that Southwest isn't on there?
I'd have to
because Jack lives there.
I'd have to look into that. It may just be what happened with our planting schedule this year, or it may be it may be tied in with the NRZs. And I know there's a little weird thing with the Southwest behind the rocks and some others coming together. So I'd have to look into that.
Okay.
But those would be the two options that come to mind.
Just that they're very, even though Behind the Rocks and Southwest are a joint NRZ, they're 2 distinct neighborhoods.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Understood. And again, it could be simply that we did not plant in the Southwest neighborhood. So that's where I say I would need to look into that, which I can do. In any event, you see here again, 55% of trees were planted in priority 1 neighborhoods, again, as outlined for priority for canopy coverage based on existing resources. 19% in priority 2, 10% in priority 3, none in priority 4, which is very interesting. There's 2 neighborhoods in the canopy action plan identified as priority 4. They are North Meadows and South Meadows. And those are just 2 areas where we didn't do or identify planting areas in this fall. And then again, about 15% in priority area 5. What I'd say about that is there were really 2 driving forces in terms of maybe 3 driving forces in terms of planting in those priority 5 areas. One was what I mentioned before in terms of the private contract we had to plant in Bushnell Park. The second is we do have a small amount, and at the request of the city forester, where we will do replacement trees. So if, for example, a tree is lost to a motor vehicle accident or something like that, Heather may ask if we could replace that tree. So there's a small amount for that. And then the other project that was significant in that area was planting at the public safety complex. One of the reasons I mentioned that is we've already talked about Clay Arsenal on this call and their need for trees there. And that public safety complex really straddles the border between downtown, sort of downtown north, and the entryway to Clay Arsenal. So,
Patrick, can I interrupt for one more minute, just because we're on this side? And again, when I'm looking at it, South End is a designated neighborhood, as is West End, but you have North End in there, which confuses me because we have Clay Arsenal, Upper Albany, Blue Hill. So what are you considering?
Yeah, I think that should say Northeast. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Yep. And I can fix that.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. And again, pretty pie chart, but I just up here is your eyes will be better served to look at the table in terms of if you want to look out, by neighborhood in terms of what we did. So that's the context. And, it's interesting because having the on-call tree contract, on-call tree contract with the city of Hartford, basically gives us the ability to plant trees in the city at the direction and approval of the city forester and the Department of Public Works. And so, within that contract, we take direction from them, but we were able, as I mentioned, because of the funding in the general fund, to get right to it this fall. And so on the one hand, that helped with the trees that we were able to plant right away. But if you think about it, the trees that we were planting at the end of the season, we also likely would not have gotten to those trees if it weren't for that funding in the general fund. So I just want to point that out as well. So as a thought exercise, more specifically, I sort of looked at that kickstart that we got from the funds and what it meant in terms of tree planting. So this is my attempt to spike that out a little bit. So thinking of the 133 trees that were funded in this method, this is the breakdown in terms of the neighborhoods of where those were, with, again, a large percentage being in the priority 1 and priority 2 neighborhood. Of those trees that are in the priority 5, almost all of them, save maybe one, were in the or save the ones in behind the rocks, were in that public safety complex. So those are the kind of numbers that bear out: 53% in priority 1 and 25% in priority 2. So that just gives you a little idea in terms of where some of those trees are. In addition, it allowed us to move beyond just planting trees in public parks and to get out into the streets and the avenues and really put trees in some places where they could do most good. So here you see just some visual pictures of that. If you look on the left, that's actually the Connecticut Deep Commissioner helping to plant some trees and highlight some of the good work that's happening in Hartford. So wanted to leave you with that, say thanks, and then I will kick it back to Jack. Excuse me.
Thanks, Patrick. To conclude, I just want to say that it worked. The purpose of that allocation of general fund money did precisely what it was intended to do. Not only did it allow for more trees to be planted, but it allowed for a more consistent situation at KNOX, so they could plan and they could carry things out. It allowed for better support of the staff people who do the tree planting, and it allowed us to get that fall planting done that is critical, both in terms of smoothing out the process over the course of the year, but also taking advantage of the excellent planting time for planting. So thank you for supporting that. Thank you. And we'll look forward to continuing.
Yep. And I will Thank you again. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Jack. I will open it up to my colleagues for questions. Councilman, we'll start this time with Councilman Gale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greatly appreciate it. I'm going to have to jump off right after I ask my questions. I have an actual work obligation at 7 o'clock. And thank you all for the presentation. And certainly, I've been a huge supporter of all of this, of these tree plantings, and want to continue support for that. I get that the tree plan sets out these priority areas. What I don't understand, and I'm wondering, within priority 1 area or priority 2 area, how do you then decide where you're going to put those particular trees? Do you have sort of a 10 or 20 year plan laid out for where the trees would go in each priority area, or is it just at that time you make the decisions? And I guess it's a question for anybody. I don't know if that's a Heather question or Patrick question.
Well, I mean, we take advantage of our tree inventory that we have, as well as just canvassing and driving the streets and really just identifying very clearly, because I need to nail down the species, right? So I when I'm out there, I have to see the space and know that, if a columnar oak is going to be planted there, or if a yellowwood can fit there, or a giant white oak. So it's a lot of hands-on, type of work to map it out.
So, I'm in the West End, and my neighborhood was planted, in 1890 to 1910, and all these trees are dying. We've got a lot of huge trees which have created a great canopy over the year, but every day I'm seeing another one of these big trees coming down. Do you have any particular plan in the West End to say, well, we need to look at Tremont Street next year, we need to look at the front half of Kenyon the year after, anything like that?
In terms of planting, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying being the key word here, to do the priority areas. And then, if we, can go through and say, do a large maintenance sweep on, say, Tremont Street or what have you, and then do the stump grinding, and then we plant. I like to have kind of a blank canvas, if that makes sense. Even if it's integrated with the large mature trees that are still standing and still healthy. That's kind of how I prefer to get things done, because otherwise I'm jumping around. We're conducting removals around newly planted trees and trying not to kill them, and all of that. So just, trying to be smart about it.
Well, appreciate the efforts. I will say I am very sad about the trees that we're losing in the West End, and we would certainly like to see more trees planted. I see 5 trees planted in the West End. I mean, it's a very, very small number. I can certainly tell you that just that one block, as a for instance, Tremont has virtually 1 tree left on the block from Cone to Farmington Avenue, 1 mature tree. Every other mature tree has come down. So, this is terribly unfortunate. Anyway, second comment question, if I may. I don't know to what extent we are doing this. You may already be on top of this, and Director Looney may be on top of this. It certainly strikes me that there's been tremendous effort towards developing permeable surfaces, and that this is something that everybody's going to be looking at as we move forward over the next 5, 10, 20 years, from both a climate change perspective as well as a water issue and drainage issues. I mean, there's just lots of good reasons to have permeable surfaces everywhere, including the fact that your trees won't die when you plant them in what you've described as the limited areas that the city owns in places like Clay Arsenal. Certainly would love to hear you come back at some point in time Feel free to talk to us about what it would take for permeable surfaces, because put a dollar sign on it so we can go try to get the money. It's without knowing what we're looking at, it's hard for us to throw a dart. But thank you all, and my apologies for having to cut out, but greatly appreciate it. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman LeBron.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Chair. I think the first thing is to acknowledge, oftentimes we come on these spaces and as council folks, the community thinks that, you know more about everything, but that's not the case. And I want to say—
Really? That's what you always tell me. Oh, okay. Never mind.
We'll talk about that later. But I think that the first thing is, I had to look up the word permeable. So Councilman Gale, if we could talk about permeable surfaces offline, I would definitely love to know more about that. But more specifically into this presentation, I want to say thank you to the team that presented. And I am a converted tree lover and understand now understand how valuable the tree canopy means to our community. And I want to thank Heather and Patrick and Charmaine Craig, who is not here, and also Councilwoman Rossetti and your leadership and making me understand. And so this is a topic that I'm continuing to learn on, but I'm also very interested in. So with that being said, the first question that I have is, on both of the slides, Parkville seemed to have the most trees, both in overall planting and then also with city council funding. Without going to the specifics, what were the hot spots, if you will? Parkville is a bigger neighborhood, but when I think of a map chart, the heat map areas, if you could just give me the top 3 areas within Parkville that got the most trees.
Yeah, so there are two driving forces for that, Councilman. The first was a contract that we had. We were actually a subcontractor on planting trees along Park Street, and it was a fairly big contract. And so that was one of the 2 driving forces. And then there was another, I would say, 25 in terms of in Parkville, what was supported by the council. There was about another 20 trees that were sort of across from the Save-A-Lot Plaza, kind of on the other side of Park Street there, near and close to the entrance of Pope Park. So those were 2 spaces. So they're kind of on the sidewalk right there. It continues that line on. So there's not a gap in kind of that project overall. So those were 2 of the pieces. I think if you were to look at all of, and I didn't strip out all of the trees just done by the city, my instinct is that would even out a little bit more. But sometimes it's sort of where you start, and then the places the neighborhoods you got to, halfway through the season or towards the end of the season aren't going to pop off this page as much.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Chair, just one more comment/question. So I'm going to try to formulate my thought and try to put it into a question. So one of the things that folks know me as is sports. I love sports, and I love my Hartford Yargos. So with that being said, across the street from the Yargo Stadium is that lot. It's been there. There was a building before. I was born in the north end of Hartford. My family lived there. And so often we walked by that empty building that is now the parking space. But more recently, I walked in that block, if you will. If somebody could help me with I'm hoping that folks understand which block I'm talking about. It's directly across from the stadium.
Yep.
So you have Heaven Skate Park 2, if you're, facing it to the left, and then you have, the Salvin's corner,
the barren empty lot.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay, great. So there in front of there, you have these spaces where apparently trees were cut down. And so there's these grates in the sidewalk, and there's cut down trees there. So the thought process for me is that when in the baseball stadium, when folks are walking from the parking lot, it gets in the hot summer days, the shade would be appreciated because you either have to walk to one entrance or the other. And so although it's not a long walk, it can be a hot walk, particularly for young folks, although it's only a couple blocks. And so the shading, I think, would be appreciated there. But the other thing too, connecting this outside of sports is connecting downtown to that Albany Avenue kind of entry point way where folks, I think it would invite and be more welcoming for folks who are walking from the downtown area where the G-Fox building is. Again, I go through structures through old things, even though it's not there anymore, but people know what I'm saying. So when you come from there to then go to, where Salvin's used to be and that lot there, that can help create that connectedness. And so is there anything planted there? And if not, would you guys be open to a suggestion in terms of planting trees there? So that was a long-winded reason as to why I'm asking that question. Thank you.
For you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Director.
The councilman. When that lot is developed as the next, I think it's the next phase. I'd defer to development services on this. They have a lot more up-to-date information than I do, but I believe that's the next piece of downtown North to be developed. And I believe that the streetscape there, the sidewalks also need work, that would all be taken into account as part of that development. So I would think in the near future, I totally agree with you. And that is kind of a barren stretch, especially when it's about 90 degrees outside and you're walking into the stadium. And that shade is certainly needed there. I think it would probably end up, again, I'll defer to development services, but I think it would end up having a treatment sort of what you see along Trumbull Street, going down to Market Street, trees of that type and that caliber. So probably something along those lines. But that's definitely certainly a good point about knitting the two neighborhoods, downtown and the Albany Avenue, North Main Street corridors there into it. But yeah, I would think development services could probably give you the latest and greatest on that.
We'll get a follow up on that. Thank you, Director. That makes sense. Councilman, are you done?
Yeah, I just, thank you, Director. I guess the only comment around that is, and without understanding the whole, development piece, is that if there's an opportunity to plant trees ahead of the development schedule, as long as it doesn't create a log jam with it, because we are going to have an upcoming season, although baseball is on strike, Yard Goats will be having a season. And so, just thinking about the folks waiting across the crosswalk, just making it, a little bit more inviting. So that's just a suggestion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Yes, Jack.
If I can step in a little bit on that issue.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a couple of points. One is that planting in old tree pits in sidewalks is a very expensive way to plant trees. And also many of those tree pits are really not appropriate, which means that to do it properly, we need to cut sidewalk, totally reorient everything, replace the soil, all kinds of work there. We don't just dig a hole and plant a tree.
Kind of so like new build versus rehab.
Yeah, no kidding. So that's one issue. The other issue is, and I think Councilman Gale referred to this, like how did these priorities get set? And the priorities are based on the heat island effect and where people live. Because the real value of trees is on people where they live. It cools them off throughout their day there, and it makes their neighborhoods cooler. So the priorities have the highest priorities have been set in residential neighborhoods where the canopy is thin. And that also, it also connects with Councilman Gale's question, which is what about the West End? Well, even if all of Tremont is cleaned out, the West End in general as a neighborhood still has the best canopy cover in the city. And that's also one reason why Southwest isn't getting so much attention. We're in pretty good shape.
Right. It's just, it wasn't on the list at all. That's,
right. That's because there were no trees planted in our neighborhood, except actually on the fire station on New Britain and Mountain Street.
Okay.
But anyway, that's
okay. So I just to tie this up because we're at 6:45. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you. A quick question. Anybody can answer it. Maybe Jack, maybe Heather. It's $1,500 a tree, correct? Is that what you said, Jack? So is that kind of a equation of 100,000 divided by 1,500, or is it not that simple? In other words, how many trees do we get for the 100K?
I think, what did you say, Patrick? 133 or something like that. It's about 700.
But I thought KNOX didn't do all the planting.
All of that, it's a little hard to tell because the money all gets thrown into one bucket. The general fund money and the CIP money, as far as the way.
But that would be a question that we would like answered precisely. So if you could kind of find a way to get to that, that would be great for me because I have some thoughts in my head. So you can get back to me on that.
Okay.
Just what that is. And then I would like to end with, again, to Councilman LeBron's point, and I was an ignorant tree canopy person. I would say mine goes back to about 10 years ago because of my good friend, Charmaine Craig, AKA Tree Lady. And really, I have learned to respect and just admire the people who are proponents of trees. I understand what they do for cities. Even more so, if anything taught us in the last couple of years with us being outside so much, how much we need trees, what it does, what Heather said, what it does for neighborhoods, just, the whole heat island effect. So we will continue to be, I know I have Councilman Gale, Councilman LeBron, and others. We will continue to be supportive of this and try to figure out how we go forward. So if there are any other questions, any more comments, we don't need a vote on this because it was a presentation, but that would lead me to the famous motion to adjourn.
Madam Chairwoman, can I make one comment before that?
You can, even though I did make a motion to adjourn, but go ahead, Patrick.
Oh boy, thank you. I appreciate the deference. I just want to share, there's a aspect of the Canopy Action Plan, which if you need a booster to be able to get up to the counter, it's a good document for that. There's a lot in there, but tree maintenance is very important, especially on the larger trees. And to some of Councilman Gale's comments about trees in the West End, we do want to make sure, and KNOX believes in preserving and maintaining and taking care of those long established trees, because it would take a lot to replace those in terms of canopy coverage. It's not what we do, so I'm not giving a report on what KNOX has done, but I want to clarify we support that. And
we're aware of that also. Thank you. All right, now back to, and thank you to our Corp Counsel and others on the call. Thank you very much. So now again, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
And I believe we're both in favor. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you and have a good night, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, folks.
Bye. Thank you.